The National Electrical Code, specifically Section 525, addresses the location of attractions relative to overhead conductors. However, the code itself does not provide a definitive definition of the term attraction. Generally speaking, an attraction is understood to encompass rides, games, or other activities that are primarily intended to entertain or amuse people. Therefore, a display, such as the local tractor dealer's exhibit at the fair, is unlikely to be classified as an attraction under the NEC interpretation. This is because the primary purpose of a tractor display is typically to showcase products and provide information, rather than to provide direct entertainment or amusement to the audience. Given that the tractor display is not considered an attraction, it would generally be permissible to locate it under an overhead conductor carrying less than 600 volts. However, it is critically important to ensure that all other applicable requirements outlined in Section 525 of the National Electrical Code are strictly adhered to. These requirements may include, but are not necessarily limited to, maintaining adequate clearances between the display and the overhead conductor, ensuring proper grounding and bonding of any metallic components within the display, and implementing appropriate safety measures to prevent accidental contact with energized parts. To elaborate further, Section 525 of the National Electrical Code is dedicated to addressing electrical installations in amusement parks and similar venues. This section provides specific requirements for wiring methods, overcurrent protection, grounding, bonding, and other electrical safety aspects related to amusement rides, concessions, and attractions. The primary goal of Section 525 is to minimize the risk of electrical hazards in these environments, where large numbers of people are often present. When evaluating whether a specific setup, such as the tractor display at the fair, falls under the scope of Section 525, several factors need to be taken into consideration. Firstly, the intent and purpose of the display should be carefully examined. If the display is primarily intended to provide entertainment or amusement, such as a simulated tractor driving experience or an interactive game related to tractors, it may be considered an attraction and subject to the requirements of Section 525. However, if the display is simply a static exhibit showcasing different tractor models and providing information about their features and specifications, it is less likely to be classified as an attraction. Secondly, the physical characteristics of the display should be assessed. If the display involves moving parts, flashing lights, or other elements that could potentially pose an electrical hazard, it is more likely to be subject to the requirements of Section 525. For example, if the tractor display includes a rotating platform or a demonstration of the tractor's electrical system, it would be prudent to ensure compliance with the relevant provisions of the National Electrical Code. Thirdly, the location of the display relative to overhead conductors is a critical consideration. Section 525 specifically addresses the clearances required between attractions and overhead conductors, with the intent of preventing accidental contact and ensuring the safety of both workers and the public. If the tractor display is located under an overhead conductor carrying less than 600 volts, it is essential to verify that the display meets the minimum clearance requirements specified in Section 525. These clearance requirements may vary depending on the voltage of the conductor and the type of structure or equipment involved. Furthermore, it is important to note that the interpretation and enforcement of the National Electrical Code can vary depending on the local jurisdiction. Local electrical inspectors may have their own interpretations of what constitutes an attraction and how Section 525 should be applied in specific situations. Therefore, it is always advisable to consult with the local electrical inspector or qualified electrical engineer to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. In addition to the requirements of Section 525, other sections of the National Electrical Code may also be relevant to the tractor display. For example, Section 400.8 addresses the use of flexible cords and cables which may be used to supply power to the display. Section 600 addresses electric signs and outline lighting which may be used to illuminate the display. Section 625 addresses electric vehicle charging systems, which may be relevant if the display includes an electric tractor or a charging station for electric vehicles. Ultimately, the determination of whether the tractor display is subject to the requirements of Section 525 depends on a comprehensive assessment of the display's intent, physical characteristics, location, and compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. It is always advisable to err on the side of caution and consult with qualified professionals to ensure the safety of the display and the public. To further clarify the requirements of Section 525, let's consider some specific examples. Suppose the tractor display includes a small amusement ride, such as a simulated tractor pull game. In this case, the amusement ride would clearly be considered an attraction and would be subject to the requirements of Section 525. This would include ensuring that the ride is properly grounded and bonded, that all electrical components are protected from physical damage, and that the ride meets the minimum clearance requirements from overhead conductors. On the other hand, suppose the tractor display is simply a static exhibit showcasing different tractor models, with no moving parts or interactive elements. In this case, the display is less likely to be considered an attraction, and the requirements of Section 525 may not be directly applicable. However, it would still be important to ensure that the display is safely wired and grounded, and that all electrical components are protected from the weather and other environmental factors. It is also important to consider the potential for changes in the display over time. For example, suppose the tractor dealer initially sets up a static display, but later adds a small amusement ride or interactive element. In this case, the display would then become subject to the requirements of Section 525, and it would be necessary to ensure that all applicable codes and regulations are met. To summarize, the determination of whether a tractor display at the fair is subject to the requirements of Section 525 depends on a variety of factors, including the display's intent, physical characteristics, location, and potential for changes over time. It is always advisable to consult with qualified professionals to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations and to ensure the safety of the display and the public. Furthermore, to provide even more clarification, it is important to understand the specific hazards that Section 525 is designed to address. These hazards include electric shock, electrocution, and fire. Electric shock can occur when a person comes into contact with an energized part of an electrical system. This can happen if the insulation on a wire is damaged or if a piece of equipment is not properly grounded. Electrocution is a more severe form of electric shock that can result in death. Fire can occur if electrical equipment overheats or if there is a short circuit. To prevent these hazards, Section 525 includes a variety of requirements for wiring methods, overcurrent protection, grounding, bonding, and other electrical safety aspects. These requirements are designed to ensure that electrical systems are installed and maintained in a safe and reliable manner. For example, Section 525 requires that all electrical equipment be listed and labeled for its intended use. This means that the equipment has been tested and certified by a recognized testing laboratory to meet certain safety standards. Section 525 also requires that all wiring be installed in accordance with the National Electrical Code. This includes using the correct type of wire for the application, protecting the wire from physical damage, and ensuring that the wire is properly connected to electrical equipment. In addition, Section 525 requires that all electrical equipment be properly grounded. Grounding provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, which helps to prevent electric shock. Section 525 also requires that all metallic parts of electrical equipment be bonded together. Bonding helps to ensure that all parts of the equipment are at the same electrical potential, which reduces the risk of electric shock. Finally, Section 525 requires that all electrical equipment be protected by overcurrent protection devices, such as circuit breakers and fuses. Overcurrent protection devices are designed to trip and interrupt the flow of current if there is an overload or short circuit. This helps to prevent electrical fires. By following the requirements of Section 525, it is possible to significantly reduce the risk of electrical hazards in amusement parks and similar venues. This helps to ensure the safety of both workers and the public. In addition to the specific requirements of Section 525, it is also important to follow general electrical safety practices. These practices include never working on energized electrical equipment, always using insulated tools, and always wearing appropriate personal protective equipment. It is also important to be aware of the potential hazards associated with overhead conductors. Overhead conductors can carry very high voltages, and contact with these conductors can be fatal. Therefore, it is important to maintain a safe distance from overhead conductors at all times. If you are working near overhead conductors, it is important to take extra precautions to ensure your safety. These precautions include energizing the conductors, using insulated barriers, and wearing appropriate personal protective equipment. By following these electrical safety practices, you can significantly reduce the risk of electrical hazards in any environment. Returning to the specific case of the tractor display, it is important to consider the potential for changes in the display over time. For example, suppose the tractor dealer initially sets up a static display, but later adds a small amusement ride or interactive element. In this case, the display would then become subject to the requirements of Section 525, and it would be necessary to ensure that all applicable codes and regulations are met. Therefore, it is important to regularly inspect the display and to make sure that it continues to comply with all applicable codes and regulations. It is also important to train workers on the proper use of electrical equipment and on the potential hazards associated with electrical work. Workers should be trained to recognize electrical hazards and to take appropriate precautions to prevent accidents. By providing adequate training, it is possible to significantly reduce the risk of electrical accidents. In conclusion, the determination of whether a tractor display at the fair is subject to the requirements of Section 525 depends on a variety of factors, including the display's intent, physical characteristics, location, and potential for changes over time. It is always advisable to consult with qualified professionals to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations and to ensure the safety of the display and the public. By following the requirements of Section 525 and by following general electrical safety practices, it is possible to significantly reduce the risk of electrical hazards in any environment.